All right. Thank you. I'm just going to start talking. Everybody eat lunch. Enjoy yourselves. Like Aaron said, for those who want to have more of a discussion when I'm done in about 10 or 15 minutes with the sort of presentation parts, feel free to come up here. Maybe I'll step down. We can sit around some tables and have more of the conversation part. We just felt it would be easier to show information and share from up here. So we changed registers before the prior presentation, and so now I'm changing registers as well. I'm Nate Schenkkan. I'm the Senior Director of Research at Freedom House, which is a US-based global human rights organization. And unlike, I think, almost everyone else here, I'm not an academic. I'm not affiliated with an academic institution. So I'm speaking about a topic where my perspective comes more from the outside on the human rights side, and hoping that it can bring some information for you all that's relevant to what you all do at your centers. The issue that I'm speaking about is relatively narrow compared to many of the issues we've been talking about, but I hope that it's going to be relevant for you all's work. And not just for those engaged in Scholars at Risk programs or similar. We'll keep the presentation brief, and then we can have the discussion afterwards. Let me start with definitions and main ideas, and maybe we'll recap it after folks have had lunch. Great. So transnational repression. What do we mean by transnational repression? In its broadest definition, transnational repression is when governments reach across borders to silence diasporas and exiles. For Freedom House, we started our work on this explicitly in 2018, based on dialogue with academics who study authoritarianism, migration, and globalization, as well as human rights activists who are studying parts of the problem or experiencing transnational repression themselves. And so from the beginning, this has been a part of a dialogue with scholars around preservation of space for research and critical inquiry, as well as for activism. Key concepts that I think we'll talk about during this, and that you'll hear me talk about or that others can use, are origin states, meaning where someone has come from or has a national connection to. Host states, meaning where someone presently resides. The tactics of transnational repression can be physical, so assaults, kidnappings, assassinations. They can also be non-physical, digital intimidation, coercion by proxy, such as when family members or loved ones are threatened. Non-physical tactics are very common, especially, I would say, in the university setting. We'll talk about them. Form what we and others sometimes refer to as everyday transnational repression. Lastly, for the conceptual setting, transnational repression is not something new. It's not something we're claiming to have invented or claiming that appeared in the last 4 years. It's something that's been with us as long as people have crossed borders, have moved, and states have tried to exert control over them when they do. We and others in the field who are working on this from the human rights side, we do believe it's growing worse. The main reasons for this are technological changes. So technological changes which have given diasporas and exiles, those who are abroad, more influence back in their countries of origin, and have also given origin states more tools for coercion, surveillance, and even for physical attacks. Second, an increase in migration globally. We are now at the highest point that we've ever reached as a global society for people traveling or moving, migrating. And finally, impunity for states that engage in extraterritorial abuses. So then, let me just speak a little bit about the big picture, scale, and scope for transnational repression. For us, the first big effort that we made in this field, which we published in February 2021, was to try and establish some parameters around global scale and scope for transnational repression. This started with a data set of incidents that we created beginning from 2014 through 2020. We released that version in 2021. Now we update it publicly on an annual basis. The data set only includes direct physical cases in which we have adequate confidence and that can be publicly sourced. So it's very much a partial view on this issue, but we see it as helping define the problem and provide guidance for certain additional policy and research interventions. As of the end of 2023, the data set includes 1,034 direct physical cases involving 44 origin states and 100 host states. This is a sufficient number, we feel, of sufficient diversity to understand the problem as a global one, not confined to one population or one actor, and not confined to one set of host countries. Just again at this very large global picture for what we're trying to talk about. These are the top 10 perpetrator or origin states in our data set. China, Turkey, Tajikistan, Russia, Egypt, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Belarus, Iran, and Rwanda. We're very aware this is based on a certain way of organizing the data. It excludes a very large amount of non-physical transnational repression based on the certain kinds of incidents that we coded. But it does give us a certain amount of understanding of the problem and a certain way of simplifying and dumbing down some of the ways in which we could react. So now let me get to the meat for this audience, hopefully for those who are interested. So what does it look like in academic settings and on campuses? My colleagues, Yana Gorokhovskaya and Grady Vaughn, recently authored a report on transnational repression on campuses in the US that we released earlier this year. I'd also commend, there's a relatively new, month-old, 6-week-old report by Amnesty International about China's use of transnational repression against China origin students, particularly in Europe and in the US, that they just put out. That's really very excellent. Whole wealth of interviews there. Main findings, we see transnational repression as a persistent, widespread threat for students, faculty, and scholars with national ties to origin states that practice it. It can take a variety of forms in terms of tactics, but most common are digital and physical surveillance, the harassment of family members, disruptions of events on campus. Some of the examples from our research that we've found, officials from a graduate student's origin country asking her to report on discussions in a small graduate seminar, protesters being videotaped at protests on campus and their relatives in their origin country being contacted and threatened by origin country law enforcement, origin state officials contacting university administrators to warn them not to host a human rights activist and warning students from that country not to attend the event. A professor writing about her community's experience in her origin country who was then threatened and her university hit with a cyber attack. A scholar involved in a Scholars at Risk program who was harassed by the origin country, accused of very serious crimes, and eventually deported by the US under manipulated pretenses back to the origin country. These are all examples of TNR, transnational repression in an academic setting. In terms of who's affected, China right now dominates the discussion. The number one reason is the sheer number of students on US campuses, and in, I would say, a number of other countries as well, where there's an enormous number of Chinese students. But also because of the breadth of China's campaigns and the way that China engages in transnational repression, and an infrastructure behind that for pressure in university settings, as well as outside of university settings, that's kind of unique to China. Additionally, though, Egypt, India, Rwanda, Saudi Arabia, Turkey are also very notable within this, although certainly these are not an exclusive list. So I'm happy to talk about any examples. How's it relevant for scholars, for administrators, for you all? I think you all would be able to better identify it than us, but from us, we see impact in terms of students and scholars' ability to participate in campus life, to conduct free academic inquiry, or to speak freely about issues of importance to them. And certainly within this, scholars are both support those who are targeted, so they're in this role of having a duty towards others who are being targeted, but are also often targets themselves. Okay, now I'll speak very briefly about some of our main recommendations, and then we can go into discussion. I'll come down there, maybe we'll just pull up a table, or I can just answer questions, whatever people feel like. Recommendations that we've suggested include to adopt a definition formally within university structures for transnational repression. So a lot of work at this stage of this issue comes from, at a very initial stage, creating a definition that is relevant for the institutional setting in which you are. Because transnational repression has a lot of different ways of manifesting or ways it can be responded to depending on who the actor is. So in migration institutions, there are things to look for as far as co-optation or abuse by the state, by the origin state. That's a very different set of problems than it is for a university and a very different set of responses. So adopting a definition gives you that framework that helps people understand this is how this could affect my role or my responsibilities. Create procedures for reporting incidents within the university that do not engage law enforcement and that protect the rights of those who are accused while generating information about the issue and opportunities for response. Make public statements to respond to incidents of transnational repression on campus. We often hear in our research, both on campus and in other settings, that individuals, communities targeted by transnational repression don't feel supported when they see silence. So they feel very strongly that statements on their behalf or statements recognizing what they're experiencing is an important part of them continuing to feel like they're protected or continuing to feel like they're a part of that community. To incorporate explanations, to incorporate definitions of transnational repression into student and faculty codes of conduct. So that members of the university community are introduced to these ideas and they become a part of the way in which people understand their responsibilities or the ways in which their community is prepared to respond. And expectations, right? Expectations for what that behavior and conduct is and where they can go. And lastly, continue to collaborate, raise awareness among administrations, programs, and departments where transnational repression may be a risk. This is, I think, what I'm doing here. So that's the last of them. That's really all the slides. I'm happy to go back to the beginning because I know people were getting lunch. If people want to, have specific questions, if they want me to go back and kind of recap some parts of the start. I'm also happy to come down there and kind of sit around a table, though people I think are comfortably eating lunch, which is probably nice for everyone after a long day. So however people want to proceed, I guess, would be my, I'm happy to just listen for like a voice vote. If people want to like come down, people want to come up to microphones and ask questions. If people want me to go back and rehash, I'm also happy to do any of those. Thanks.